There's this kind of myth out there that a single peer or subordinate can submarine your effort when you're coming to CAP as a candidate and prevent you from being selected, as a commander or a senior staff officer or CSM. That is not the case.
Hello, fellow leaders, and welcome to the Military Leader Podcast. I am Drew Stedman. I've studied leadership for 3 decades. I've put those lessons into practice as a U.S. Army officer, and I am passionate about growing leaders from every profession. In this podcast, you'll find conversations with today's most successful leaders. My goal is simple: to deliver insight to help you become a better leader, and then develop the leaders around you. In this episode, we go behind the scenes as the Army picks its future senior leaders. My guest is Colonel Bob O'Brien, the director of the U.S. Army's Command Assessment Program, which is a multi-week selection crucible that lieutenant colonels, and sergeants major must pass through before being selected for command. In this episode, we talk about the whiteboard origin strategy of the program, the science-based evaluation methods it incorporates, and the program's extensive effort to remove bias from the evaluators. Colonel O'Brien also shares what leaders can do to prepare for their own assessment. So if you hope to attend CAP in the future, or if you are involved in any aspect of talent management for your team or company, then you definitely want to listen to the end. I know you're going to get a lot out of this episode, and when you do, I want to challenge you to take the next step. First, do something with what you learn. Write down what strikes you, reflect on it, and put it into practice so that you can become a more effective leader for your team. Second, share this episode with other leaders who would appreciate it. You can do that by sharing it with your network or on social media, or you could send a link to your team and include your thoughts about what impacted you. Remember, good leaders act as conduits, not roadblocks, when they come across something valuable. And finally, take a moment to leave a rating on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. Those reviews and comments go a long way toward putting this conversation in front of the leaders who could benefit from it. And don't forget to check out themilitaryleader.com, where you can find this episode and a ton of other leadership writing and resources. And if you have an opinion on your experience at the Command Assessment Program, leave a comment on social media. We'd love to hear about it. Okay, let's get to my conversation with Colonel Bob O'Brien. Thank you for joining me today, and lead well. Bob, thank you so much for coming on today. And I know this is a topic area that a lot of officers and NCOs are interested in since it's evolved in the last several years. And if you don't mind, as we get going here, just if you would share a little bit about yourself and about your career and the path that you took to get to this point.
Hey, Drew, thanks for the opportunity to take time to talk about CAP. It's something that I'm very passionate about. We got a great team of folks who have spent a number of years dedicating their lives to leader assessments to increase Army readiness and make sure that we're putting the best leaders in charge of our brigades, battalions, and other key staff jobs. So I'm an infantry officer. I am not a personnelist. I'm not an AG officer, although I sometimes get mistaken for that. I also sometimes get mistaken for being a psychologist too, because over the last few years I've learned a tremendous amount about how human resources works and how the mind works and how all of that interplays. Several years ago, I was asked to come on the Army Talent Management Task Force after finishing 18 months unaccompanied overseas, and came to work on the Army Talent Management Task Force for Major General J.P. McGee, who I knew you interviewed at the beginning of this journey, a few years ago. And in that role, my first project was to build the assignment marketplace. It's called the Army Talent Alignment Process. A lot of people call that the AIM-2 marketplace. That was my first project. I did several other special projects and eventually landed full-time on the Command Assessment Program. But my work with the Command Assessment Program goes back to the very beginning of the program in January of 2019, when General McConville, who was then Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, asked General McGee, is it possible for us to do a better job of selecting battalion commanders? So a small team of us, Colonel Townley Hedrick, Dr. Elizabeth Salmon, and Dr. Bob Kilcullen were on a whiteboard kind of trying to figure out what could a better system look like, and that became BCAP. We handed that concept off to a team of folks who fully fleshed it out and initiated the program that is now called CAP with that first BCAP. But I've been involved in one way or another with CAP from the very beginning and every single iteration. My career is very much a unicorn type of career. Although I'm an infantry officer, I've been kind of all over the map, done a lot of different types of jobs, including garrison command, a few logistics jobs, as well as commanding an HHC in a rifle company and an infantry battalion, and then I was commander of 5th Ranger Training Battalion, the Mountain Phase of Ranger School as well.
Yeah, great. A far cry different from mapping out the talent alignment processes for the next generation of Army leaders.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, what a fascinating moment, really, and it's very interesting for me to hear that, like many big ideas, that starts around a clean slate on a whiteboard. And when you were retelling that story and what General McConville said, what stands out to me is the importance of a question and how the leader guides that process, that creative process that's about to unfold. He didn't walk in and say, hey, I want to build a program that does X, Y, and Z. As you said, he started with a question, right? How could we improve what we have now? Did that in a way give you agency then in trying to create the best program with the best criteria for what was needed at the time? Was that enabling for you?
Yeah, so what was really interesting, and the reason we put together different teams of folks with different specialties, Townley and I are both infantry officers. Bob Kilcullen and Elizabeth Salmon are IO psychologists. The guy we actually handed the project off to build it was Colonel Don Fagnan, who started out as an infantry officer and became an AG officer. And he had a whole multidisciplinary team around him that built out the nuts and bolts of what CAP was going to look like. But bringing those diverse perspectives together over the course of what was really a very short period of time, especially when you're thinking about government work. In the period of January 2019 to June 2019, we had the concept and we had the nuts and bolts of the first pilot. And we ran 2 pilots in June and July of 2019 to figure out, is it possible for a program like CAP to work? We answered yes to that. And then, was it possible to scale across the Army? And we answered yes to that. And BCAP was born. And so the very next January of 2020 is when we started the first BCAP, and we were off to the races. And in that time, we are now well on our way to assessing over 7,000 leaders for the Army to put them in the most critical leadership positions at the battalion and brigade level. And we've had the vast majority of our leaders have been found certified for command. Only about 14% of the leaders who come through the command assessment program get screened out and found not yet certified. So very successful population coming in. They've had a lot of success in their career, and they leave here with a thorough understanding of themselves. The Army thoroughly understands them. And we're able to take the data from that to do a lot of things with, in terms of placing people into positions and helping people understand themselves and helping the Army understand how these leaders lead.
Yeah, for sure. I've been a long time believer of the idea that the most important knowledge gap in leadership is understanding how followers perceive our actions. Right,
yeah.
Like this idea that you're doing things in your space as a leader, and they're being picked up and responded to in certain ways, and understanding that is powerful for leaders. I do want to dive in on that in just a second about the outcome of CAP and when an officer gets to the end of it and what that outcome is, because you mentioned 14% were found not to be ready for command. So I want to touch on that in a few minutes, but if you would, take a second to give the overview of the program from the officer's experience in as much detail as you can, because I know much of it is close guarded for a reason, some of the the evaluation and testing and whatnot. But give them a sense really for those who might be coming up on a BCAP, CCAP, or a Sergeant Major assessment program.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so you clarified my first point there with your very last comment. So this is not an officer-only process. So we're looking at candidates to be brigade commanders, battalion commanders, senior staff officers at the colonel and lieutenant colonel level, as well as brigade command sergeants major. And we've also got a sister program that's called the First Sergeant Talent Alignment Assessment, a First Sergeant TAA, that's kind of a satellite program. We've taught divisions and posts how to do that over the course of the last couple of years. So we're using this in a multifaceted manner. So what the program is it's a program to assess how leaders lead, how leaders are achieving results. No longer is it just sufficient to get selected for these jobs at the battalion, brigade command, brigade CFN level based on your evaluations, the fact that you do achieve results. Okay, we want to see at CAP how you achieve those results. And all of this is based in our Army Leadership Doctrine. Army Doctrine Publication 6-22 is the foundation, and specifically the Army Leadership Requirements Model. We're looking at competencies and attributes of what makes leaders. So it's all rooted in doctrine. So the system consists of several assessments that try to get at how leaders are leading. Leaders will show up on their first of 4 days of assessment. They'll immediately take a height weight test, standard Army height weight test. They either pass it or fail it. This year, new, since the Army policy is now that if you score 540 points with 80 points in each event, at least on the Army Combat Fitness Test, the height weight requirement is waived. So we've incorporated that into CAP as well. Then candidates go through a series of psychometric testing, psychometric assessments. They go through a writing assessment. They go through a strategic potential assessment. They'll take the ACFT, and then and they'll do an observed behavior exercise, and all of that will get contextualized into an intake interview with an operational psychologist. And that psychologist's job is to kind of take the hypothesis that is developing from all of these assessments and confirm or deny that, and then help contextualize that for the panel that will ultimately vote whether the leader is certified or not yet certified for command. So once all of that is done and we've packaged that, the data gets presented to a voting panel called the Army Comprehensive Talent Interview, or ACTI. And that panel consists of 5 voting members for the officers. For the colonels, those are all general officers who are voting members. For lieutenant colonels, you've got 3 general officers and 2 colonels who are either sitting or former brigade commanders. And then for the sergeants major, 1 colonel and 4 nominative sergeants major make up the panel for SMAP. Those voting members will vote by majority vote after doing an in-person interview, a double-blind in-person interview with the candidate, whether the candidate is certified or not yet certified for command. What's interesting is I talked about scaling the interviews or the whole assessment across the Army. We can run in BCAP and SMAP, we can run 9 simultaneous interviews that are conducted exactly the same way. And what allows us to do that is, one, we've got a panel moderator who conducts the interview, is kind of the conductor, usually the voice of the program or of the interview, unless for some reason a panel member decides they want to ask a specific question. But that panel moderator is the only person who sees the candidate face to face. and is essentially the voice of the panel. And then every panel has a senior operational psychologist on it who contextualizes the data to the panel before they vote. And then finally, every panel has a non-voting nominative sergeant major on it whose responsibility is to provide the voice of the soldier to the voting panel members before they vote. Right, so that's what makes up the final event for CAP, the Army Comprehensive Talent Interview. 5 voting members and 3 non-voting members.
Okay. That's clearly a lot of preparation and thought and analysis went into how to make that as fair, equitable, and unbiased as possible. I mean, I think that the double-blind aspect of that is important. I know it's been used in areas like the professional musician symphonies and whatnot to select the right candidates. And I think the story goes back to a double blind that was 30, 40 years ago where a woman outperformed a man. And when the curtain was revealed, they had hired a woman, a little bit to the surprise, I think, of the panel.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and we've also incorporated many other bias mitigation measures into the system. So all the candidates who come through are anonymous. All their records that go through the system are identifiable only by a candidate number. And everybody who has contact with a candidate in an assessment has to go through a large block of bias mitigation training and then daily bias mitigation training as well to make sure that they're aware of what their biases may be. Keep them in the forefront of their mind so that they can take active steps to mitigate that bias.
So the panelists go through, and those who are doing the assessments are going through kind of a counter bias training as they go through this as well.
Every day that happens. Yep.
That's fascinating. I didn't really. I think a lot of people won't realize that. So is that something that's evolved over the course of the last couple of years? Have you strengthened this aspect of the program?
Yeah. So we thought about it during the development of it. We've got a large cohort of operational psychologists who have come to bear in CAP. In fact, we have the largest gathering of psychologists for an operational mission that the Army's ever done. And we constantly refine that thing. Interestingly, we've exported that capability to a number of places, most notably every board that meets in the DA Secretariat now, whether it be promotion or selection, statutory or a policy board, every board has a bias mitigation component to it. And I've got a psychologist over at the DA Secretariat right now who's talking to a board that's convening today, and he's doing bias mitigation training with them. Okay.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up. What would you say to the people who are listening now and are thinking, okay, we've built this huge program. There's a ton of work hours put into it. We have to bring officers and NCOs TDY for several weeks, all just to get down to something that I've been in the Army for 20, 30 years. I can identify a competitive officer just based on gut feel and my experience. I guess the question is, how is our intuition sufficient, and is this a much better replacement for the senior rater intuition that we've relied on for so many years?
So I think it's important to keep the evaluation part of this system in the loop, the intuition that you're talking about, right? That experience and the observation of leaders over the course of time is an important aspect of it. And that's why we've kept what was the CSL board is now called the Job Performance Panel. We've moved the CSL board to the back end of CAP in this Job Performance Panel to score the past performance of folks, because it is important, and the commanders in the field should get a vote in this, and that's that in the past that has been the most heavily weighted component of the entire CSL system as we've built it over the last few years. What's different this year is that this job performance panel on the back end of CAP is going to be the sole event that develops the order of merit list for the CSL. So it used to be that for the Army competitive category, at least, the PT test, the written communications assessment, verbal communications assessment, and the strategic assessment were 4 scored factors at CAP. It got added on to the past performance score for 5 variable equation that calculated the order of merit list. That system will remain in place this year for the Sergeant Major Assessment Program, Acquisition Leader Assessment Program, Medical Commander Assessment Program, and the Chaplain Assessment Program. But for the Army competitive category, we're still scoring those factors at CAP, and we're building a feedback card that is going to go into the job performance panel that will inform the job performance panel members how a candidate did at CAP. They will consider that scorecard along with the My Board file that everybody's familiar with, and determine where the candidate should rank on the order of merit list coming out of that board.
Okay. So senior raters and their comments still play a prominent role in selecting the leaders of the future.
Absolutely. Senior raters and raters. Actually, we've done quite a bit of analysis over the last year. Very talented major named Tom Maleko, who works at HRC, has done a lot of analysis and built some algorithms to really look at how boards are behaving. And I think we're going to come out with a very interesting result that may be a little bit different than it was in the past. But what we've got is really kind of an interesting opportunity by changing the system with that job performance panel being the calculator of the order of merit list. We'll have the result that will get published and eventually approved, but we'll also be able to go back and do some forensics on what could have happened if we had used the system, from 2021 to 2022, and we can see, is there a difference, and then we can continue to tweak the system. One of the really interesting things about CAP that I find really exciting is we're a learning organization. And, our devil's advocate, Townley Hedrick, has asked me every time we do CAP, can we please just do CAP the same way twice? But because we're a learning organization, we constantly adjust it to make things better year after year.
That's good to hear. I think that evolution, particularly because we are really still in the first few years of reforming Army talent management, aren't we? When I chatted with General McGee several years ago, and he was presenting these ideas and getting a little bit of feedback from peers of mine and some folks on social media. My approach was, hey, let's see. This is going to be a multi generational, if you will, evolution to make a stronger and stronger force. So even if you bump into a roadblock here and there and find something that may not work, could be refined, needs to change, we're going to be okay. But the key is, as you said, that we do keep growing and keep getting better. I'm glad to see that's happening.
Yeah, well, to that point, we're just now at the point where the first 421 folks who took the colors from the Battalion Command Assessment Program have now successfully turned over those colors to another BCAP selected battalion commander. So that's a pretty significant milestone for us. This year also we've got 33 candidates who were in that inaugural BCAP iteration who are here for CCAP this year. So we're watching how they're doing, and we've got a lot of analytics that we've got to run to start to try to answer the question of, are we being effective? And leadership is a multifaceted type of event or effort. So I don't know that we will ever be able to quantitatively answer, are we being effective? But what I do know is that we've got 421 leaders who have been assessed, been selected, and turned over the colors to another leader who was assessed and selected through BCAP.
Yeah. Well, as General McGee mentioned back then when he was heading the program, if we don't have this data, if we don't know at all what the reality of the talent in the force looks like, how in the world can we understand it, make decisions, and then shape it to the for the future and compare to our past performance? If all you have is the board
Right.
results. So I mean, I think it's definitely a move in the right direction. And then, as you said, it'll tell us so much more about our force now and then going forward. I think I'd love to see an article sometime on when you're able to compare, an officer from 10 years ago. Would they have succeeded in this round of BCAP and CCAP, and where they would have shaken out? I bet you'll find some surprises there.
I think we will. What's interesting is this year, really for the first time, because we've got a large database now that we can compare against each other. We're also going to be able to take the data that we've got and the understanding of it and deliberately build command teams in the slating. Commander and command sergeant major slated together for a specific complementary talent reason. And we'll also be able to build a team of teams, the battalion commanders that'll be in that brigade working for that brigade commander and CSM. We will be able to deliberately build them and, put talented people together because they will work well together.
Yeah. That reminds me, when I was a more junior officer, I had this thought is as teams come together, because you see some really good teams out there, maybe a commander and a CSM are paired up and you're like, they really fit together. I wonder if the Army did that on purpose. And over the course of my career, I found out, no, there's nobody pulling the strings. There's nobody placing and comparing strengths and weaknesses and making sure they complement it. 99% of it is completely chance. But it's good to see that there's maybe an effort to be able to shape that a little bit.
Yeah, so General Drew, the commander of Human Resources Command, has specifically tasked us to take that approach this year and use the data coming out of CAP, coming out of the job performance panel, and deliberately build these command teams and slate people using the data. So that's our kind of our FOOPS fight right now, is we're trying to figure out how we do that. And then we've got a strategic fight going on right now about how are we going to evolve CAP over time, well into the future, and what assets are we going to have to put into place, all while we've got a COOPS fight going on where we're actively assessing leaders in CCAP right now, or CCAP is finished, I'm sorry. BCAP is going to be halfway finished tomorrow, and then we'll pick up SMAP here in about a week and a half.
Well, I'm tempted to take this conversation in a bit of an innovative way here and see what AI tools you can use going forward and how we can look at all that data. But I will ask you the experience of the officer, or the NCO that's going through it. Let's zoom down. So they arrive with their peers, they're showing up on TDY, and there's a bit of this pressure of the unknown and whatnot. You send them some preparatory information and some packages, maybe some prompts to get them thinking about certain things. They probably expect a curveball or two that they're trying to game and understand and whatnot. But as they go through it, what advice would you have for the officer who is about to step in across that line and go through the program here? What can they focus on to help them be most successful in the program?
So I'd like to take that conversation upstream many years to start off with. The number one thing that a leader can do to prepare to be selected for a battalion or brigade command is to lead in accordance with our Army doctrine, right? Be a good leader. Be a leader who leads with dignity and respect. It's okay to make hard decisions. You're going to make unpopular decisions. People are going to be upset with you, right? There's this kind of myth out there that a single peer or subordinate can submarine your effort when you're coming to CAP as a candidate and prevent you from being selected, as a commander or a senior staff officer or a CSM. That is not the case. If if we get one-off comments or one-off, feedback from a peer or subordinate on that, it's very apparent to a panel as they're looking at whether they should vote certified or not yet certified. It's very apparent if somebody has an axe to grind against somebody. There's a very clear trend line on the vast majority of our folks that are coming in for the assessment to that they are leading in accordance with Army doctrine. They are good leaders. Okay. When there are clear trend lines that folks are not leading well, they're leading in a counterproductive, maybe toxic, bullying, frequent bursts of anger, or an ineffective, maybe they're unwilling or unable to make decisions at that level. If folks are leading that way, that becomes quite clear in the totality of the assessments. So there's also a myth that the peer and subordinate assessments are the only assessments that matter here at CAP. That is data that we use to confirm or deny hypotheses, look at people from different angles. What you've got is, instead of the system, where I was selected for battalion and brigade command, where my senior rater looking at me was kind of the sole determinant of whether I was going to be selected. Now we've got data points coming in from all over the place to provide different perspectives of how a candidate leads. And that gives us the ability to understand how people lead, right? So the thing to develop, or the thing to really think about in preparation, is how have you led, and everybody's got vulnerabilities in their leadership. So understand those vulnerabilities and be willing to face those vulnerabilities. We see candidates who come in with a high degree of self-awareness, and they tend to be the most successful candidates at CAP.
Okay, so self-awareness is the key. That's exceptional, I think, because that can cover a number of different things. Self-awareness in any one of the performance domains, whether it's physical, emotional intelligence, intellectual, or doctrinal knowledge. And for the folks in listening here who aren't familiar with the Army's leadership paradigm and those competencies and attributes that Colonel O'Brien mentioned, those categories, criteria are character, presence, intellect, leads, develops, and achieves. And so under each of those broad categories, there are a number of different behaviors and expectations that the Army has for every leader who is assigned here. So you think that the program is effective at filtering out the leaders who aren't ready for that position, whether it's brigade command, battalion command, or sergeant major, and then vice versa, conversely, maybe finding those diamonds in the rough who might not have been competitive based on their file strength in previous years?
Yeah, so like I said a little bit earlier, about 14% of the people who come in are voted not yet certified for command, or they don't pass the other screening events, either not passing their height weight test or their Army combat fitness test. 14% of the people get screened out as a result of CAP. That's the historical trend. There is, though, ability to move around amongst the population, because there are people who come into the system, opt into the system for centralized selection list or command selection, and decide that they don't want to come to CAP for whatever reasons. Usually it's a personal reason, has to do with family or not wanting to be a commander, or it's not the right time. Lots of reasons. But that takes another small population of folks out of contention. And then leaders have the ability to influence where they stand on the order of merit list by coming here to CAP and doing well in the scored events, doing well on their physical fitness test, the ACFT, doing well on their writing and verbal assessments, and doing well on their strategic assessment. If they do that, then they've got the ability in the Army competitive category to influence how the panel is going to vote. And they've got a voice in the boardroom. Okay. In the other categories for SMAP, ALAP, MCAP, and the chaplain program, they still have the ability to put points directly on the board for themselves by scoring well in those scored events.
Okay. I think that's, fascinating to understand that it is an interactive process where you bring your tools and your best, your best persona, your best self to the fight, and that based on these other factors of feedback and the board and those things it's a malleable process throughout it. It's not simply just showing up and getting ranked. I mean, it's an interactive thing.
Yeah, it's when we started this pilot in June and July of 2019, we thought we might be onto something if we got about 10 to 15% movement around an order of merit list. And in that pilot, we had 27 candidates who were on the infantry and armor alternate list at the time. And what we found was about a third of the list moved around where people stood on the list. And we literally had the top candidate coming in who had scored the highest on the CSL board move down to be the bottom candidate. And the bottom candidate who had scored the lowest in the CSL board, because he had some kind of a strange OER pattern, he moved up to be the top candidate in that pilot. So we literally had a flip-flop of top to bottom, and then a 33% movement within the order of merit for that pilot.
Oh, wow. I bet that was a surprise when it kind of all got shaken out, huh?
It was, and that trend held true, through the last cap that we did in the fall of 2022. This year we'll see how it shakes out, because the system is a bit different for the Army competitive category, but we are thoroughly anticipating that this the members of this job performance panel are going to look at the scorecard that comes out of CAP, and it's going to have an impact on where people stand on the order of merit list.
Okay. So might there be a message then for the officers out there, I'm thinking captains and majors, who will meet a BCAP board in the future, when they run into a senior rater that they don't gel with, they don't get along with, they don't feel like sees them and may rank them in a certain way based on that? Is there a message there for them to say, you're going to get a more fair shake and a better evaluation of you as a total officer when you come to the BCAP board?
You'll certainly have an ability to impact the outcome at CAP. You'll have the ability to showcase your talents at the command assessment program. For an officer or an NCO like that, I think the important thing to do is take advantage of the Athena assessments that are occurring in professional military education courses and learn about yourself, and take the developmental outputs of those Athena assessments and understand them, put them into action, so that you don't come to BCAP for the first time, or SMAP for the first time, and you don't know where your strengths and vulnerabilities are. You don't know where your blind spots are. The unfortunate part of where we started in time and space was we couldn't wait 10 or 20 years to put something into place that would influence how the Army selected battalion and brigade commanders. Right. General McConville asked us, okay, what's it going to take to do this? We gave him an option, and gave him a time frame that was a long time, and then he asked us if it was possible to go fast. We gave him an option that was less time, but still quite a long time. And then he asked us how we could go faster. And then he told us, okay, let's go faster. So we accepted risk at his guidance to not be able to do a controlled experiment where we had an experimental group on one hand and a control group on the other that we could compare over time. Right, he asked us to get started, and we did. But that's why we don't know. We can't really thoroughly answer the question of how do we know we're being successful. But what we do know is that somebody who's self-aware, somebody who understands their strengths, understands their vulnerability, and leads within the Army doctrine, leads with dignity and respect, but is still willing to make the hard calls, is somebody that is likely to be successful. And all of that translates to a leader on the back end who who is capable of achieving great results, but doing so without being nasty about it.
Right, right. I love the fact that 600-20 says that commanders will establish positive command climates.
Yes.
It's very specific about that, and it's not up for debate. And the reason is because teams perform better in those environments. They learn better, they work with each other better, they grow faster, they respond to change and adversity in better ways when they have a safe, trusted environment. And the leader is in large part responsible for that climate. Of course, there's the cultural underpinnings of a unit that feed that as well, but the leader can have a direct effect in that. And that's that's probably my favorite line in 600-20 is that directive. So what's the change now? And you mentioned it before we got started here, in notifying those officers whether they are ready for command or whether they're going to come back for a second try after some more growth. Talk to me about that change, if you would.
Yeah. So first of all, on returning candidates, CAP is a redemptive process, right? It's possible to come to CAP and be found not yet certified one time, and then come back in a subsequent opportunity and be found certified. So when I was selected for command, if you didn't get picked up your first time, it was highly unlikely that you were going to get picked up on the command list a second or third time. And I was only eligible to compete for 3 years. And really until this year, an officer was only allowed to compete for 3 years. We've opened up that aperture, so any lieutenant colonel can compete at BCAP, any colonel can compete at CCAP, no matter how far they are removed from their first eligibility. So that's the first major change that we've had. What's really different about CAP this year is we are notifying candidates on site if they are found not yet certified for command. So after a candidate comes out of that Army Comprehensive Talent interview, they immediately enter a feedback loop, and this is for all candidates. They all enter a feedback loop. They go into a room to calm down for a little bit, for about 15 minutes, and do some guided self-reflection, take some notes, and then we take them into another room for about 45 minutes with an operational psychologist, and they get a developmental outbrief with that psychologist, focused on thematic strengths and vulnerabilities. So everybody's getting that first as their first line of feedback. For those who are not yet certified this year on site, the evening after they're finished with their Army Comprehensive Talent interview, we're notifying on them on site if they're not yet certified. And so I have to do the vast majority of those, and I've got Sergeant Major Felicia Red goes into the room with me for that notification. We've done, as of last night, we've done 61 notifications for folks who are not yet certified for command. They're tough conversations a lot of times, but what it does is it helps us cement the feedback that the operational psychologist has given to the candidate earlier in the day with some takeaways, and that begins the developmental journey focused on wherever the candidate wants to go. We've also got an executive coaching program as a part of our feedback loop, and every candidate gets 5.5 hours of executive coaching offered to them. Some decide not to take it. It's something that the candidate can choose or not, whether they want to do it. And we don't track what happens in those executive coaching sessions. They're confidential between the coach and the candidate. We've also, starting last year, we give candidates written feedback now. In the early days of CAP, we did not give any written feedback, and we expected candidates to take their own notes. So a very fair critique was that the feedback loop was lacking. Now, CAP is an assessment that is designed to inform a selection, right? It is not designed to be a developmental program, but there's so much that happens here that not providing some developmental feedback is a bit of an irresponsible thing. And we realized that before the first PCAP, and we have gradually matured the feedback loop over time. But we took very deliberate steps in maturing that so that we could ensure that the assessments didn't get compromised and people weren't going to school on CAP and coming back as an inauthentic version of themselves and try to be successful when they had not gone through some leadership behavior modification. So we've got a number of candidates who have come back to be and ultimately been successful. We've got battalion and brigade commanders now who have been certified after 1 or 2 return trips. There's and they're doing very well. They've gone through very developmental journeys to address their vulnerabilities in their leadership.
Yeah, I mean, what a defining moment it can be for an officer or an NCO who might not have been told about certain behaviors throughout their career, whether by subordinates, peers, or by superiors even, and to come. I'm sure there are some shocking moments in that room with the door closed, and they find out that certain things were revealed and that they're not ready. I mean, really, it can be dream shattering for a lot of people. I know those are tough conversations that you guys have to prepare for and guide them through.
Well, so the way that conversation goes is really a constructive conversation. So we go in, and the very first thing is, I'm sorry, but I'm here to inform you that you are not yet certified for command. So our job now is to make sure you've got some takeaways from CAP, understand what you got from your operational psychologist, and if you've got any questions about that or any gaps in your understanding, Sergeant Major Red and I go in to help clarify that. We've also got an alternate team. Colonel Townley Hedrick and Sergeant Major Rob Garcia are the alternate team on that. They come in, if we've got a large number of candidates that we've got to notify. But then after that initial shock and the realization that, okay, we're here to help you, then it can grow into a pretty formative conversation, pretty productive conversation for the most part. Some candidates come in and they're shocked or they're angry and they don't want to talk about it, and that's okay. There's a variety of emotions, so I've seen people range from a few people breaking down crying to denial to just wanting to understand, and several iterations of talking through them. We've had a few people who have come through who have actually expressed relief that they didn't get selected because they really had other things that they wanted to do, but they felt this was something that they had to do. And we had one last night and we had one 2 nights ago that they were like, okay, well, now there are opportunities open for me that I thought were going to be closed. So that's been an interesting, surprising kind of response, and what we haven't had, which I'm very, very happy about, is we have not had anybody come and flip the table over and just get really mad and go storming out. By and large, these are very productive conversations, and we can, we start to work a path forward with them. And then we come out of that room, and I go back and I notify the chain of command. And once the chain of command knows, they will often call the candidate directly to pick up, to do kind of a warm handoff from us. And then the chain of command can come back to me and ask, okay, what can we do to work development? So I'll send them information about why these results occurred, and I will close every one of those out with some opportunities on that the candidate can implement to go forward, right? And so this is the first time that we're implementing that written feedback to a chain of command that requests it. We've done that for a number of years in every CAP, but it's been phone calls and they've been difficult to schedule and what have you, and we've been transmitting things verbally, and on the other end, the leader we're talking to has been transcribing what we're saying. but now there can be a written record if a chain of command wants to get more information about it.
Yeah. And I think that's an important step, because there's something about having that written product that you can go back and reference and take away. And it's I'm sure it's professionally done, and almost report that you might get out of maybe PCC or going through one of the schools. However, this is a look. I feel like, as you're describing it, this is a look at an officer's and an NCO's performance, and in their it's a deeper look that they're going to get in any other time in their career is focused down in them. So even a mentorship role or a senior rater will not have the same perspectives that you guys are able to achieve there with the various tools that you have. So I think it's great to have a good takeaway. So I will thank you for you and the team for putting in the work. Your TDY for several weeks. You're jamming day and night to push out the products and prepare for the engagements. And I know it's a lot of work. I feel like it's added value for the Army. And I'll just as an aside, just please pass on a huge thanks to the team there, because I think it's a good effort, and it's something that the Army needs. And just kudos to you guys for making it continually a better product for the team.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. We do have a great team. A number of us have extended beyond our mandatory retirement dates to stay on this team and keep this effort moving forward and get it permanent into the Army culture. So it is really a labor of love for us, and most of us have been together for a very long time, longer than any assignment we've ever been in elsewhere in the Army. For some of us also, we've got children who are either recently commissioned or are about to commission. And so it's a deeply personal thing for us too, to be able to make sure that our kids are going to be led by the best leaders.
Yeah, for sure. And that actually takes me to, I think the question is good to close on, is in what ways do you want to see the assessment program shape the way that officers and NCOs lead? How is this impacting the way that we lead in the force?
What's really interesting is we're seeing this year a really significant change in the way peers and subordinates are providing feedback about candidates. Several years ago, we were getting very raw feedback about, so-and-so behaves this way or that way. This year, there's a marked change in the way that feedback is coming to us, in that it's in the language of doctrine. It's in the language of Army Doctrine Publication 6-22, and all the factors that you laid out a little bit earlier. That tells us that people are going and they're looking at the doctrine. It tells us that we have developed a capability to hold leaders accountable to the Army leadership doctrine. And it's no longer something that is just a decentralized idea that you can implement based on where you are, right? The Army ideals are getting down to lower levels in terms of how we expect people to lead, and people are accountable for it. And they come here, and those who have led over time using the Army doctrine as the foundation for how they lead, those are the people who are very successful, and those people who are willing to be vulnerable and develop that self-awareness, interact with their peers and subordinates in a positive way, lead with dignity and respect, those are the people who are successful here at CAP. And ultimately, what we're looking for is a leader who is going to lead a formation that wants to be there, that will positively impact the readiness and warfighting capabilities of the formation that they're leading, and ultimately lead to victory.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there, and I'm glad you brought that up. And you mentioned it before about the self-awareness. I feel like in the conversations that I've had, and you mentioned the Athena program and that the assessments start earlier in the career, it seems like we are embedding this idea of self-reflection, right? Of a leader you can lead in a certain way and get feedback about that, and then change. You can evolve and adapt and grow as a leader, and sometimes really in the traditional in the recent years in the Army, you kind of have to, you feel like you have to perform a certain way, adopt a certain identity. It can maybe go against your authentic self. But in this idea that you can evolve and adapt and become better, there's this concept that it's not a fixed kind of thing, that you can become more effective. And I think that is important early on in a career, because it gives you an opportunity to grow throughout your career. So,
yeah, if I can just add a little bit on that. I'll give you a little bit of vulnerability and self-awareness, to illustrate what I'm talking about. So Major Bob O'Brien would not have made it through BCAP, right? I absolutely would not have, because I was not a very productive leader as a major. And so in that learning and growing and all the things that I've done over the course of the last several years to understand leadership, understand psychology, understand human dynamics, has really opened my eyes. And I hope that there are leaders out there that that can learn as much as I've learned about leadership and how effective it can be, when you're not on the spectrum of counterproductive or ineffectiveness in the Army leadership requirements model. We've got a great team. They do incredible work. We've got people who have extended on our team to continue doing the CAP mission, extended beyond their mandatory retirement dates. We've got folks who have extended just on their tours of duty, so that they can stay involved with this. And we've recently hired a large number of Army civilian professionals onto the team who have been doing a great job, and they're very effective, highly talented, and they all came voluntarily because they know this is an important mission for the Army.
Yeah, fully agree. That's great. I will put a plug in for what you mentioned earlier about the coaching that comes out, that officers and NCOs are offered 5 sessions of coaching. If people aren't listening to this who haven't been dialed into a coach or had a coach before, and you get the opportunity to get a coach, do not pass that up. Coaching can be a powerful way to augment your own leadership and your self-awareness. I've had a coach before, and I think I saw that you were ICF certified coach. And so that's something, I think there's a lot of potential in the Army to be, for that to grow in the future. I would love to see commanders that have an Army provided coach to help them through command that's apart from their senior rater or maybe a mentor they have. I just want to encourage everybody to take advantage of that if they get the opportunity.
Yeah, so the Army has an Army coaching program that's administered right now by the Army Talent Management Task Force, and there's a growing cadre of Army coaches that is developing for just that purpose. So if anybody wants information about that, you're welcome to reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn at Bob O'Brien 4. And I can get you dialed into our Army coaching program.
Yeah, that's great. Don't want to pass that up. Coaching's a fantastic tool. Well, good. So if just to close out here, Bob, and thanks for your time today. This is insightful. You're pulling the curtain back a little bit on something that could be intimidating for officers and NCOs as they're going forward here. If they want to know a little bit more about the program, about CAP, and maybe what to expect, where can they go, or what resources can they tap into?
Yeah, several places. One, talent.army.mil/cap is our website, and we've got all our reference materials on there. There's a whole bunch of the CAP prep guide is on there, as well as several podcasts and other videos on there. We've got a LinkedIn site, the U.S. Army Command Assessment Program on there. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well, at Bob O'Brien 4 again. And those places can get you started, and we can help folks vector in on any specific topic areas that we've got. We're out there doing a whole lot of presentations. If you want us to come and do a presentation for you, either on site or remotely as part of your LPD program, then we are very willing to do that. We travel around the world. We've gone from Australia all across the United States and over to the UK. And we're also working with several Fortune 500 companies to help them develop their own assessment programs as well. So we're doing a lot to give back, and strategically, I think one of the things that is going to come out of this long term is I think this is going to have an impact on where we are with recruiting efforts in the Army, because ultimately our message to America is when Mom and Pop America sends their sons or daughters to come into the Army, they're going to be led by leaders who have been assessed and found certified to lead the sons and daughters of America.
That's right. That's a great message. And you guys are making the force stronger. And so, again, please pass that on to the team there for the exceptional work in building this new part of the Army and making it stronger. For anyone out there listening who still has doubts about, the program and talent management and not happy with the changes that have happened over the past years, first, I just say get on board because it's the way the Army's going. And I think that when you get down to it, we are making a better force through these efforts here, and I think better leaders. I mean, I really have had conversations with people who are opening up in ways that they hadn't before because they know they're going to go through this process and they're facing some aspects about themselves they might not have confronted before. So, Bob, thanks so much, and appreciate what you and the team do.
Hey, Drew, thanks for the opportunity, and I'll close with our motto, world-class, fair, consistent.